It's time to sort this Roland R-8 out. So this is another one of those projects that's been sitting in storage for, God, quite a few years actually. I can't remember how many years this has been sitting in storage. It's got to be at least 3. Now, every now and then I kind of go down to storage and I take my Roland R-8, which is this thing here, out of storage, and I bring it back and I use it for stuff. And then I take it back to storage and I think, I must get round to fixing this. But I don't. And I've actually had the donor machine, which is this one, for probably 2 years, if I'm honest. Again, sitting down in storage. So this is kind of part 1. This is assessment. What do we need to do to make this machine whole again? And I'll go through what I think the problems are. It's not actually massively away from what I would call whole. There's only a few things that are wrong, but most notably, the one of the biggest things that's wrong is one of the most annoying things about this particular machine. So let's crack on.
Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon.
Now, Roland released the R8 Human Rhythm Composer in 1989. Was when this particular unit came in, and they actually released 3 versions of the Roland R8. There was the Roland R8, which is what this machine in front of me is. There was the Roland R8M, which is a machine I have in the studio. And then there was the second incarnation of the Roland R8, funny enough, named the Roland R8 Mark II. And I don't have a Roland R8 Mark II, I only have the original and the R8M. Why do I have both? Well, they both have different uses, shall we say. The key difference between this machine here, this Roland R8, as in the drum machine, and the R8M is that this has a sequencer on it. The R8M does not. This can only read 1 card at a time. The R8, you can actually put 3 cards in plus a RAM card, and you can read all of those cards at the same time. So you can construct drum kits on the R8M from multiple sources. So not only from the, well, I'm trying to think how many samples there are in here. Is it 64? 64 samples in here. Somebody will probably shoot me for that one. But not only for the 64 here, you could also put another X number of cards in. You can use those drums. And Roland released, I think it was 11 cards. I haven't got all of them. I've got most of them, but I haven't got all of the 11 cards that they issued for these machines. That allowed you to sort of widen the breadth. And in recent years, there's a company called Wave RX. They've released a card for this machine that allows you to import samples that you've done on another machine, and you can actually import those wave samples into here to be triggered. So that is kind of the point of history. I bought this. Well, I bought the original machine. The original machine came as part of a job lot, and I was actually buying something else, and I wanted the something else, and I got the R8 drum machine. And I wasn't going to complain because the R8 drum machine is a really great drum machine. Where did this differ from the previous drum machines issued by Roland? Well, what Roland did with this is it kind of introduced the ability to vary the tone based on theoretically how hard you hit it. So it kind of allowed sort of that velocity sensitivity, which was really great at the time, because the drum machines that kind of were before this, if you like, or the new drum machines that have been issued around this time, but the drum machines that came before this, it was very much, you know, you press a button, you strike the sound. You didn't get the option to strike it softly or hard or with more gusto or give it something else. Whereas this machine allowed you to start doing that, which is why they called it the human rhythm composer as opposed to the rhythm composer. So that's a really potted history of how the original came into my possession. The second one came into my possession again through kind of a job lot, but it wasn't. I actually bought this, but I bought it when I was buying something else. So this was included as part of the job lot. This was included as I saw it when I was buying something else and bought this as well. This one has had a much harder life than my one from the condition. This is actually still very, very nice to touch. This is horrid to touch. And you know, that's part of the reason why that's the donor machine and this is the machine I'm going to keep. So let's talk about what needs to happen to this machine. And as I said right at the start of this video, right, an awful lot wrong with this machine. But the most annoying thing wrong with it is if I take my power supply, and I only have one power supply because I got the power supply with the original. The donor machine, I didn't get any power supply with it, and they're like gold hen's teeth to try and acquire. So if I plug the power supply in, and I'll talk about the power supply in a minute, and I plug that in. If you are looking at the overhead cam, okay, so what you see is the screen, and you're getting nothing in this bottom portion. This top portion is not giving you the right information, and that's the most annoying thing about this. You can kind of use it without that, but it's very difficult. Right, if I then go to the donor machine, and plug in the power, and then I boot the donor machine up, what you'll notice is a little Space Invader going on the bottom, and then you've got song, zero, jungle, and then you've got the measure underneath it. This is all detail you don't get on my machine because the display is knackered. And it's really unfortunate what Roland did here in terms of the display. There is no modern equivalent for this display, which is such a pain in the butt. So the main thing that's going to happen with this machine is I'm going to take the display out of the donor and I'm going to put the display into the prime machine. The reason why I'm doing that and not keeping the donor is, as I say, the condition of the donor. It has had a, I would say, it's been more abused through its life. You can see that the decals around volume and value are, you know, worn away, whereas on my machine they're pretty prime. If you then go and look at things like number 12 hi-hat, you can see there's a lot of gubbins around that, and other ones here, and the machine, you know, generally is just horrid to touch. I mean, you know, I will give the machine a proper clean, but it isn't particularly nice to touch. It still works as far as I can tell, but it does not, it's not nice. So as we go through this piece of work, as I say, the predominant one is to replace the screen, and I might have to replace the plastic as well, because that's become, well, it's kind of losing its tackiness. It needs to be stuck down again. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to do that, whether it's glue or something else I need to put in there. And then I'm going to go through and test all the pads, make sure that they all work, and if they all work and I can actually get ensure that everything is working fine on this one, once I've done the screen swap, then what I will probably do is I will probably put this one up for sale for parts, for somebody to part it out, because that's not something I do. I don't tend to part things out. So I'll put it up for parts and somebody else can buy it and part it out. I'm not going to be greedy. I never am greedy when I do that sort of thing. So that's the difference. The main difference is this display. I want to get the display working on this machine so it can become productive in the studio. I did say I was going to talk about the power supply. I'll talk about that in a sec. Let me just unplug this power supply. Right. So Bose, when they issued this machine, they did the same with the R5. The R5 was kind of the little brother of the R8. It didn't have as many tones in it, and really the big difference between the R8 and the R8 Mark II was the amount of samples in it. Had more space for the PCM samples, and it gave you more memory. But the R5 was similar, and the R8 Mark II did exactly the same thing, although the R8M has an integral power supply to the unit, so you don't need this transformer. But Roland, in their infinite wisdom, supplied this drum machine with this transformer. Let's just put that under there so you can see that. Okay, so this is a transformer that takes the primary voltage, which in the UK, as you know, is 240 volts, and gives you plus or minus 10 volts. So what comes out of this little pin, this connector, is, if I remember right, it's on the left it's plus and on the right it's minus 10 volts, which effectively is the two rails inside the machine. So there's no power supply in the machine at all. It's literally just comes off this thing, and the third pin is a ground, is the 0 volt line. But why did Roland do this, and why did they make such a hard to get connector? Because getting this connector is an absolute nightmare. You cannot find this connector for love nor money. You can find the bigger version of this connector, which I think, if I remember, is an IC 1516 connector, which is the male and female of it. I think it's 1516. It could be 11 and 12. I can't remember off the top of my head. But it's kind of, there is a bigger brother of this, which is you can buy, but you can't buy it. This connector is like gold dust. It really is, and I'm very protective over the power supply. Why did Roland do that? I don't know, is the honest answer. I suspect it was cost saving, because you didn't have to put a power supply in the actual unit itself, which meant you didn't have to find space in the unit itself for the power supply. And power supplies are, even compact power supplies take up a finite amount of space. So that possibly was it. But at this point in time, Roland were doing that with a lot of the peripherals, not with the synthesizers, but with the peripherals. So with the peripherals, you tended to get a power supply. And the reason I say that is because I've got a number of Roland peripherals from around this era that come with power supplies. And I'm thinking about my BX16 mixer, which will be going up for sale at some point this year, because I'm just not going to use it anymore. But that comes with another one. Unfortunately, I can't use it on the drum machines, because on the BX16, if I remember correctly, it's plus or minus 15 volts. Not plus or minus 10 volts. Yes, I could go into the transformer and I could hack around with it, but do I really want to? No, not really. So, but Roland was doing that with a number of peripherals, and I suspect, as I say, two reasons: cost saving, you didn't have to put it in here. Two, you could make people have to go out and buy the transformer if they lost the transformer or blew it up. And it was proprietary to Roland, of course, which meant you had to pay Roland an extortionate amount of money for the transformer, because back in these days, if you remember this, if you were playing with a band, and a lot of the guys that you were playing with would have had things like Bose pedals, Bose Boss pedals, should I say. And we all remember that, you know, your mates used to go down to Argos and they used to buy the multi-value supply transformer for it, so they didn't have to keep putting batteries in these things, because these things chewed batteries up like they were going out of fashion. But if you wanted the Bose, the original Bose, not Bose, Boss, sorry, supply, it was 14 quid in a place called Argos, which was a shop in the UK where you tended to go and buy this sort of stuff, or it was £70 from Roland Boss. So that was the thing, and I can't remember what these were new, but I can tell you now, they weren't cheap. They weren't cheap. And it's like, trying to find these on the second-hand market is very, very difficult. And so there you go, that's the kind of potty history, a bit of a sort of a bumble about these, the power supply. Now, the other side of this, of course, is there is another project that's coming, and you'll see that shortly. And that's a project on the R5. Now, my R5 is in a dreadful state. It really is in a dreadful state. And I kind of have been pondering what to do with the R5. So look out for that, because that will be coming onto the channel soon.